Yo guys, F1 22 features a wide range of assists, and they're a great way of allowing drivers of all skill levels to race the extremely fast F1 cars. The assists are in place to take away some of the more difficult aspects of driving a really fast Formula 1 car. Some assists are more convenience focused, such as pit assist and pit release assist. These allow the computer to take over certain controls at different points during a race, so you just don't need to worry about them. But other assists such as traction control and ABS are designed to improve how easy the cars are to drive in F1 22. You can enable and disable all of the assists in any way you fancy, allowing you to create your own custom driving profile. But the fact is that driving with assists can slow you down. Some assists are designed to slow the car down just to make it easier to drive. However, not all assists necessarily make you slower. Things like DRS and ERS assist, as well as the pit lane assist, are all more convenience based, so you can focus more on driving and they won't really affect your lap time or make you slower. When you start to drive in F1 22, there are a few assists which you can turn off without really affecting your overall experience. Turning these assists off will make you feel more involved when racing in F1 22 without making the game too much harder. And these are things like the steering assist, braking assist, the pit assists, DRS and ERS assist. Both the steering and braking assist should not be enabled unless you really need to in F1 22. Both of them apply some levels of control over the steering and braking, making the cars feel very strange to drive. You will have some control with these two assists enabled, but the car will prevent you from doing some inputs, so only enable these if you're really struggling to keep the car on track. Both the pit assist and release assist will make pitting in F1 22 easier. These will automatically slow your car down as you start to approach the pit lane, and the pit release assist will simply handle the whole pit stop for you, so you won't need to worry about your clutch at the end of a pit stop. And also the DRS and ERS assist automatically activate and deactivate both your DRS and ERS systems while racing. The DRS in F1 22 is normally manually activated when you enter a DRS zone, but the DRS assist will just take over this job for you, and the ERS assist will take over the control of your overtake ERS button in a race. Both of these assists are very minor and don't affect the game very much at all, so I'd recommend keeping them disabled to give you the choice over when to activate either of these mechanics. Now we can move on to some of the more tricky assists. First one I want to look at is manual gears. The automatic transition will essentially take away the need for you to change gears manually. This is actually one of the assists which can slow you down a little, as the automatic gears aren't as optimised as manually shifting. Automatic gears will be one of the harder assists to turn off, as manually changing gears is a big part of F1 racing. You may even have to change gear 40, 50 or 60 times a lap depending on where you are. Across a long race distance, this could be hundreds if not thousands of shifts per race. Learning to upshift is probably the easiest part of learning to manually change gear. You can learn to listen for when to upshift by listening to the engine sound, or you can watch the RPM shift lights. As you accelerate, the shift lights will start to light up. They start on the left and move through to the right. Once the rightmost shift light becomes lit, or you see a purple shift light, that's about the optimum time to change gear, which is normally around 11,500 RPM. You can watch the shift lights on your HUD or on your in-game steering wheel. Downshifting is actually the trickier process compared to shifting up. It's harder to know when to downshift as you don't have any real indication other than the engine sound or the RPM shift lights going out. As you approach corners, you'll also be downshifting multiple times in very quick succession. As a general rule of thumb, when learning the correct time to downshift, keep an eye on those rev lights, and as soon as they all go out, that's the time to pull your downshift. As you slow down further approaching a corner, you will need to downshift multiple times until you reach the ideal gear for the corner. I'd recommend either turning on automatic gears for a lap to see what gear you're in for each corner, or alternatively you could watch footage of other drivers' laps on the in-game monitor to see what gear they're in for which corner. The racing line is an extremely helpful assist in F1 22. It will help those unfamiliar with specific tracks learn the best racing line, including when to brake and accelerate, and you'll often even see competitive F1 22 racers using the racing line. This is easily one of the trickiest assists to turn off, as it requires you to learn and feel confident around all of the tracks in game. You'll essentially need to be able to learn every corner on every track to feel confident turning the racing line off. However, this doesn't need to be as hard as it sounds. If you're unfamiliar with specific tracks in F1 22, I'd recommend enabling the racing line during your first practice sessions or hot laps, This will allow you to learn the track and become familiar with each corner's braking zone and the ideal line. Once you start to feel confident that you know which corners are coming at you, in what order, you can look to disable the racing line. At this point, it's up to you to remember your braking points, as well as when you can start accelerating through the corner. You don't necessarily need to learn every corner on a track to be able to turn off the racing line though. Instead, you can apply a few basic principles to decide where to position your car. You should almost always position your car on the outside of the track when approaching a corner, and then look for the brake markers at the side of the track for reference points as to when to start braking. Always try to brake in a straight line and lift off the brakes as you start to turn in. Aim to hit the inside curb of the corner, called the apex, before you start to accelerate, and then drift back out to the outside of the track as you accelerate to minimise the corner angle. This approach to most corners in F1 22 will serve you well. Even if you don't necessarily remember the exact corner ahead, as long as you know which direction the corner turns in, you can look to implement these tips. With practice and after a few laps you can quickly memorise specific corners, and as you complete more and more laps, you'll remember and learn even more corners. Before you know it, you'll feel extremely confident around the entire lap and be able to race without the racing line enabled. Both the ABS and traction control assist are possibly the two hardest to turn off in the whole game. They both help to make your car much easier to drive, and without them, you'll be feeling the full power and might of a raw F1 car. The ABS is an assist which makes braking in F1 22 easier to manage. The ABS is possibly easier to disable than traction control, so I'm going to look at this first. What the ABS assist does in F1 22 is it stops your brakes from locking during heavy braking events. It will detect when your wheels are about to lock up, and the ABS will kick in. It will slightly release the brake pressure to avoid a lockup, and then it will reapply it again once it's safe to do so. This avoids you having to manually manage your brake pressure, and instead you can simply apply full brakes without the risk of a lockup. However, having ABS enabled will mean that it takes slightly longer to slow the car down compared to having it disabled. In real world F1 cars, they don't have ABS. Instead, the braking force and pressure are directly controlled and managed by the driver. If a driver applies too much brake pressure for too long, the brakes can lock up. This will stop the wheel from turning, which results in a loss of grip. This will make your tyres skid across the track, causing excess tyre wear, and it will almost always extend your braking zone, meaning you could miss the corner apex. To start to learn how to brake without ABS, you'll have to learn to modulate your brake pressure. You'll also need to learn what increases your chance of locking your brakes. Remember, your brakes are much more sensitive to lockups at lower speeds, so at higher speeds you can apply a lot more braking force to help slow the car down. However, as the speed falls away, you can't apply as much pressure. If you keep the brake pedal fully pressed at low speeds, you're likely to lock a wheel. As you start to slow down, start to decrease the amount of braking input you have applied. The same applies to braking and steering. If you start to turn your steering wheel while your brakes are applied, your chances of a lockup increase, and this is because your steering and braking are heavily linked. As you start to turn the steering wheel, you should look to release the brake pedal. When done at the same time, this is called trail braking. Essentially, as you approach your turning point of a corner, you can start to apply some steering input, and as you do this, start to release the brake pressure. This balance combines both the braking zone and the start of your turning point, and it will allow you to brake later into a corner as well as carry more speed into the apex. Both of these advantages help you spend less time through the corner, which will increase your lap time. To learn how to trail brake, you should first approach the corner in a straight line like you normally would, and brake hard while ensuring you're travelling in a straight line. Start to release your brake pressure just before your turning point, but not fully. You should start to turn into the corner while continuing to release your brake pedal further. At the apex of the corner, you should be fully off the brake pedal and ready to accelerate out of the corner early. The final assist I'm going to look at is the traction control, and I'd have to say this is probably the hardest assist to disable and drive without. It does a very good job of controlling the amount of wheel spin that is allowed when you accelerate out of corners. This assist is especially useful when racing on a track with slower corners or when racing in the rain. F1 cars are incredibly sensitive when you accelerate, and the sheer amount of power these cars have makes it very easy to spin when you accelerate out of a corner too hard. Traction control will kick in if it detects your rear wheels are about to lose grip. Much like ABS, the traction control will lower the amount of power being delivered to your rear wheels to prevent a spin. This makes it much easier to drive in F122 without spinning, but it will make you slower out of corners. To learn how to drive without traction control, you'll need to understand why it's so easy to spin your car. F1 cars send all of their power to the rear wheels under acceleration. When you apply full throttle at slower speeds, all of this power can cause your rear tyres to spin. This will break traction and cause the rear of your car to oversteer, potentially resulting in a spin. To stop spinning when exiting corners in F122, you need to modulate how much throttle pressure you apply under acceleration. This is a very similar approach to managing your brake pressure to avoid locking up that we just spoke about. Just like when braking, you should only apply full throttle when your car is pointing in a straight line. If you have any steering input applied at all, it will make it easier to spin your rear wheels when accelerating. Instead, as you exit a corner, apply only a little bit of throttle, and as you start to straighten the car, you can gradually increase the amount of throttle applied. When you're completely straight, you can then look to apply full throttle. This gradual application of throttle is the key to driving in F122 without traction control. And just remember, at slower speeds, you're much more likely to spin your wheels if you apply full throttle. At higher speeds, you can apply full throttle much easier. One top tip for making it easier to drive without traction control is to utilise your on-throttle differential. This is a setup option that you can change in the car setup menu or through your MFD while you're out on track. Lowering your on-throttle differential will decrease the likelihood of your rear wheels spinning under acceleration. The negative side of this is that you won't have as much outright drive out of faster corners, so it isn't recommended to lower this all the way to 50 in most cases. However, if you have disabled traction control and are still struggling, or you're racing in the wet, decreasing this setting can help prevent your wheels from spinning. Hopefully these tips in this video will help you navigate the F122 assist, and as you progress and learn the game more, you'll feel more comfortable with the car, allowing you to disable more and more assists. Remember, you don't need to disable all of these straight away. Instead, gradually learn how each assist affects your car and disable them one at a time. Practice on the track with each assist disabled before moving on to disable the next one. Over time, with practice, you'll be able to race with all assists turned off. This will give you the most immersive F122 experience and allow you to unlock your car's full potential. Let me know how you get on in the comments below, and shoot any questions over and I'll try to answer them as quickly as I can. If this video has been any help to you, hit that like button as it really helps this channel grow, and subscribe for more F122 content. But for now guys, I'll see you on track.